Welcome to Holding Down the Fort by U.S. VetWealth. I'm your host, Jen Amos, a Gold Star daughter, veteran spouse, and upcoming author. This season, we're helping seasoned spouses explore new opportunities and ideas outside the military so that they can make more confident choices for their next chapter. Why? Because you too are retiring, and now it's your turn. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you've been following the show for a while, I know it's been some time. Thank you for your patience. I hope it hasn't felt like too much time, simply because if you are a subscriber of the podcast, if you subscribe at insidethefort.com, you'll know that despite not publishing any podcast episodes, I have still been keeping you all up to date on a weekly basis. It's been interesting because last summer I consolidated all of my podcast assets to one platform known as Substack. And it's really given me an opportunity to look beyond my brand as just a podcast and see how else I can serve our military community through different mediums. You know, whether it's a blog post, resharing of a YouTube video, or just a newsletter update. And also, since I've returned, it was important for me to, what I'm going to say, get off the hamster wheel of content creating for the sake of it, to slow down and focus more on my network, my community, my connections, relationships that I have built throughout the years of hosting the show. And it's not going to always mean publishing a podcast episode. And I'm really happy that I have personally made that shift because I'm just in a different place when it comes to my online brand with Holding Down the Fort and how I want to do my part with our company, U.S. VetWealth. Speaking of which, while I haven't published any podcast episodes, if you're a subscriber of the show, you'll know that in my weekly newsletters, in the times I don't publish an episode, I have an opportunity to showcase the team I work with, primarily my husband, Scott, and our partner, Mike Wallace with Blue Water Advisors, and be able to show you another side of what we do through their live show, Military Retirement Blueprint. And so it's been really freeing for me to show you all that I am not a one-woman band and that I have a team behind me. And depending on the needs of our business, my role is going to shift. And so podcasting for me has become more of supplementary as opposed to a necessity. And my hope is that in being honest about this with you all, that you can hear my genuine desire to continue serving that's not just limited to podcasting. Additionally, thanks to being on Substack, it's been easier for me to share more private content to our subscribers. In fact, one of the previous episodes, and I'll share this in the show notes, but I have been able to revamp Inside the Fort, which is the private podcast of Holding Down the Fort. And I've decided to turn it into a more casual show where I shoot the you-know-what with people. You know, shoot the shirt. Shoot the shirt, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to keep it PG here. But what I'm excited about with the private podcast is I get to be more candid with returning guests of the show as well as upcoming guests, and to have a more casual way of checking in with them and or, brainstorming ideas for when they actually end up on my show, for the public show, Holding Down the Fort. So it's been really fun to expand and to evolve the way that I engage with our military community, and reminding myself that the purpose of all of this to begin with was to network and connect with our military community, but most of all, to provide new opportunities and ideas outside of the military so that you can make more confident choices in your next chapter. And it's not going to just look like a podcast episode anymore. For example, part of me having taken a break this last month was to hyper focus on my book. And I'm happy to now explore a different media outlet to consistently serve our military community. And speaking of which, I'm happy to share that I finished the latest draft of my book. Fun fact, it had originally been 20 chapters, 20 plus chapters. And, in giving myself time to stay connected with the community and continue to be grounded and maintain a realistic perspective of the military community, it's actually helped me realize what I'm really trying to say. And what I'm really trying to say in my book, in the Military Spouse Benefit Plan, doesn't require 20 chapters. In fact, I cut out more than 10 chapters of my book to get to the heart of what I'm really trying to say. And I'll tell you the spoiler alert now, because I'm not trying to hold in a secret here. I want you to hear my journey. I want you to hear the process, especially if you've never written a book. This is the first book I'm writing, by the way. So it's been a fun journey. It's been transformative. But most of all, I hope that this is transformative for the spouse that hears this. And so the spoiler alert here, in case you're curious, what I'm really trying to get across with this upcoming book is to inform the seasoned spouse about the survivor benefit plan, to give her the confidence to book a call and explore her options. But not just book a call, okay? Not just book a call, but to book a call prepared with your understanding of the survivor benefit plan and understanding the difference between seeking guidance from the government versus seeking advice in the private sector. Those two are completely different approaches to understanding the survivor benefit plan. So it's been a very fun journey, just finding the language to articulate this in a way that I hope is useful for you and for anyone that is faced with the survivor benefit plan, and understanding what it truly represents, because it's more than just, hey, honey, what happens to us if you die? It's more than that. And I hope that this book provides that perspective. So anyway, that's what I've been up to in the last couple of weeks. In other news, I am really excited to get back with you all and bring a past guest to my show, Candice Van Dertholen, also known as Candice Elizabeth. I have been trying to find the right time to release this episode, given, work and book writing priorities. But I'm glad to release this episode at this time because, to be honest, editing this episode was quite therapeutic for me. And I mentioned this in a previous interview, shout out to Robin and her podcast, The Ascending Podcast. But personally for me, I have learned to channel like grief and loss through work, like through my art, in hopes that, what I have personally gone through can be of benefit to other people, through what I put out there in the marketplace. What I'm trying to say is editing this episode couldn't have come at a better time, because I'm going to say this very vaguely, but I'm going to say enough for you to understand where I'm coming from. And I'm going to say this in a way that I trust you as the military community will understand. So in the military community, we are not new to facing our mortality. Death is not unfamiliar to us. And I personally have had a recent incident that reminded me of what resources are available or not available, some may argue, to help our military community move through trauma. And the thing is, this conversation really isn't about the topic of trauma. It's about reconnecting oneself with our internal language, which, from my perspective, I understand that to be reconnecting with one's inner voice long after we've been disconnected from it. And what's coming up for me now, as I had edited this episode and share this announcement with you, is the question of how do we stay present in our most authentic selves in times of shock? Or how quickly can we move past shock to reconnect with our most authentic selves? With Candice, we will learn about the average age when we become disconnected with our internal language, as far back as early childhood development, even as early as 7 years old. We lose our internal language, disconnecting from our authentic self as we realize we're not safe to be ourselves. We focus more on external validation or, life circumstances widen that disconnection. That said, a major transition, like military retirement, can remind us that we may have been out of touch with our internal language for a long time. I think this conversation, one, has been very relevant for me to remember that even in times of, and again, I say this vaguely, in times of facing our mortality, and how do we move past that to recenter ourselves and be back with our authentic selves? I hope that this conversation is also relevant to someone who maybe feel like they're stuck at a fork in the road and they may not know how to navigate it. Maybe someone feels unworthy. Maybe if you feel unworthy of change because past traumas are resurfacing. And most of all, maybe our past conditioning may be the filter through which we look at our present life. Now, the good news is that you don't have to navigate this fork on the road alone. Candice will help us identify patterns that may be holding us back and how we can move through and beyond these experiences so that we can support ourselves and bring ourselves to a connection point back to where we feel whole, safe, and supported today. And again, as I think about recent events, this conversation reminds me of how to move through events that may be shocking. So this is part 1 of 2 of our conversation. If you've been following the show, I like to break it up 20, 30 minutes at a time, simply because I personally like to spread out the conversations I have with my guests now, and it gives me time to really reflect on these conversations and make them a part of me in a positive way. So in this conversation, in part 1 of 2 of our conversation with Candice Van Dertholen, we will reflect on Candice's journey with energy work since she last joined us 2 years ago. Her past episode will be in the show notes. You're welcome. For anyone who is new to energy work or energy medicine, Candice will explain in layman's terms what it means and what it is, and how it helps us reconnect with our authentic selves. We get into how this generation is the right generation to talk about energy work versus past generations. And I give my amateur understanding of the Strauss-Howe generational theory. I don't say it in the show, but when you hear me hiccup, when you hear me try to explain something about generational theory, that's what I'm referencing, the Strauss-Howe generational theory. But we also talk about different generations such as baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs, et cetera, et cetera. Candice will share how a 77-year-old client with an autoimmune disease really benefited from energy work. And I will relate to this in my own way when I used to have chronic eczema breakouts. Overall, we talk about how integrating energy work into your life and being more inquisitive can be of great benefit to you. And considering how this is a show about military retirement and military transition, I think that this is just very fitting to have Candice join us to talk about how her clients tend to come to her when they are in a state of transition, how she works with her clients to uncover what's preventing them from feeling worthy of change, starting with personal alignment. And then we'll get into how one even begins energy work. Once again, I'm happy to, have Candice on because to my knowledge, I'm unaware of energy work resources provided by the government. So this will give you a fresh perspective of what's available out there outside of the military and getting it from a military spouse perspective like Candice. So that is the overview. Candice, I said this on the show and I'll say it again. Your presence and your voice are just so calming. I hope you start a podcast one day. I just want to say thank you again for returning to the show. And I hope that our listeners get a lot of benefit from part 1 of your interview. Part 2 will be released the following Thursday, but until then, enjoy our conversation. Hi, Candice. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I always love your energy, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. I don't think that's just flattery. I think you mean that.
No, I genuinely mean that. I'm not just saying it.
Oh yeah, I'm in my element whenever it comes to podcasting, and it's just my way to connect with people, to network and relationship build, and it also gives me permission to pry. Like I feel like it's like understood that people are going to get asked questions.
Absolutely.
So it's like the one outlet where I feel like I'm allowed to be like nosy and a questioner and curious about people. In real life, some people might feel a little too uncomfortable with that, to
Right.
get asked really deep questions. But Candice, it's been a while since you've been on the show. Last episode for our listeners, in case anyone is curious, was episode 190. That was in April 29th. Now, I'm sure we recorded that beforehand, but that episode came out, yeah, in April 29th, 2024. That's basically 2 years ago.
I don't know it was that long ago. Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
It's wild. I had a past guest, shout out to Teresa. She was recently on the show. I think I last spoke with her in 2020. It was a while. And it's so crazy because it's kind of like, where did the time go and how are things going? And it's cool to check in and see how people have progressed in their brands, their organizations, their businesses. And one of the main things I had noticed with you, Candice, when we were talking offline, planning for this conversation, was your language. The language in which you talk about energy work has changed. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but just any top of mind thoughts coming back to the show here on Holding on the Fort.
Really just excited to dive into, again, how much has changed in all of this work. I mean, 2 years ago was a completely different person. It feels like, anyway, my business was in a completely different space. And so I'm just honored to get to come back and maybe even encourage those that are new in all the things to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and dive into what you do. I personally have not done energy work myself. And in the military community, you are one of the few people who I know that offer it. So, for anyone that's never heard of it, or maybe they've heard of it and haven't looked into it, why don't you tell us in layman's terms, what is energy work?
Yeah, so energy work or energy medicine, however we want to label it, is a part of the process of relearning the internal language that lives deep within us. So, as an energy practitioner, my goal is to help you bridge that communication back. And a lot of this looks like embodiment practices. So, paying attention to the physical body and really listening to those signals again. We're really quick to minimize when we have an ailment instead of listening to what the body is telling us we need. And also, energy medicine is about going back in our timeline and really healing through these past experiences that are replicating in our current experience.
Hmm.
And again, I see different cycles and patterns, and it's very woven and interconnected with our early childhood development and then even our conditioning that we've lived through. And so, while some of the practice that I do is the coaching side, listening to the language that people are using in their everyday circumstances and scenarios and how they're connected with these different experiences, but then I bridge that gap and say and share how this experience over here is mimicking the energy over here. And so I guess the easiest way to say it is that we're tuning back into the internal language that exists within you.
My follow up question to that is, when did we lose touch with that inner language? I think the way I'm hearing it is, when did we stop listening to ourselves or hearing that inner voice?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we start that process around age 7. And after about middle school, we really start disconnecting further and further from our authentic self, is what you hear oftentimes in the world. But the reason why it happens is because we learn differently, right? We learn that we're not safe to be who we are as we are. We learn to mask who we are in order to fit in. And we learn how even love can be conditional. And so all of these different layers of our experience shape how we become visible in the world and what we feel, even towards that visibility. And we begin disconnecting the further and further we need that external validation that we are safe to be who we are. And it depends on your upbringing. Some people are brought up with a very fluid exchange of this is who you are and you can communicate this way. And it's not to say that there's not rules in those households, but
Hmm.
some people encourage spiritual connection versus a very rigid and structured connection. And, far and few in between in the I guess you could say anybody that's in my generation or older, just because we didn't really know that much about ancient wisdom or how the body works or how our nervous system works. And so, as we're starting to dive more into that understanding, and science is starting to not only prove all of these practices, but finally publish and publicize these practices, we're starting to have different opportunities to understand and learn about it that we didn't have before.
Yeah, you got me thinking about. I was recently going down this rabbit hole about, I don't remember the two scientists or people behind it, but it's called the generational theory. I'm going to totally butcher this. I'll put this in the show notes for anyone that's interested. But every generation comes with different like challenges, and the next generation is impacted by the prior generation, and so on, so on, so on. So the common theme I often hear, like I'm a millennial, and what I know about, let's say, like baby boomers and Gen X's and anyone up is, mental health, for example. It was a taboo topic. It wasn't even really a named topic. And now I feel, especially with Gen Z, it's all about being in touch with your feelings and labeling your feelings, talking about your feelings. And so, do you think that we're in the right generation now to talk about energy work?
We are. Actually, even since the last time we spoke, not only has it been easier for me to talk about it openly, in that I've really started to embody that this is the work I'm here to do, but the world is more receptive.
Mm,
And what I find, and the reason I find that to be, is that again, science is starting to talk about it. So everything from these major podcasters that are bringing, a neuroscientist who's proving through neuroscience that she's communicating with her deceased husband,
mm,
to the telepathy tapes that's talking about the science of near death experiences and mediumship. So those were not available even 2 years ago.
mm,
And so as we awaken, we already know this in the more spiritually connected world, that as we start to awaken to that divine remembrance that we are souls, we are here with a different purpose, and we are starting to pay attention to it more. And
mm,
because the information is more available, it's easier for us to say, oh, this isn't scary. This is actually really safe. In the last year alone, I worked with 92 clients. And out of those 92 clients, maybe five of them had ever had energy work before.
mm.
Now, that tells me that not only am I creating that safe space for that to be possible, but that the people that are coming in are already curious and ready. And it's really exciting to get to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell us about the 77-year-old client that you had worked with and how amazing it was for her to work with you? And we'll get into like the 6-week sessions
Mm,
and stuff later, but tell us a little
yeah.
bit about how eye-opening that was and maybe inspiring for you to witness her change.
Oh my gosh. So she, first of all, is so fun to work with.
Hmm.
She came in as a referral because she's not my typical client. I mean,
Mm,
I do work with people who have different types of autoimmune disorders, but she in particular came to me very specifically for that purpose. And she had lived with this autoimmune disease since her childhood.
mm,
So, probably in high school, actually, technically, but either way, she came in and you could see the difference in her color from video one to the last one because this was a virtual appointment, but her vibrancy has come back and her ability to physically move differently has come back. She's
mm,
had results show up on her labs. Her doctor is impressed. He just cares the transformation. He doesn't care how she's getting it. But what has been the biggest part of her change has been not only the forgiveness that she's been able to give to her family
mm,
and the amount of years she has held on to not feeling loved or connected in her family. She's been able to heal so many deep wounds that she didn't realize she was holding on to. And even holding back from being her authentic self. When you grow up in a time like that, back then, it was really uncommon for different life experiences to take place. So if you had anything going on at home, you really didn't talk about it. And you definitely didn't talk about your mental wellness. And so just imagining that she had no physical outlet to let go of everything that she was holding. And she's been holding on to that her entire life. And that has caused the disease that she's been holding. And so, but in doing this work, she has really created a new life for herself in that she's been traveling again and she's traveling with greater ease. She's like, I can't do everything, but I can do so much more than I used to. And I just want to go back, like the color of her face has just begun to have this like rosy glow. And I think that she's even considering love after years of just being herself. So it just goes to show that when we're willing to do this work at no matter what stage of life we're in, no matter what's gone on in our life, there is so much possibility on the other side. And she looks forward to coming together. Every time we see one another, she's just excited. And we just do check in appointments now, but, she's doing life differently. And that's what makes the difference.
That reminds me of, my only point of reference is the buzzwords mental health. So I think about, for example, when I was in my 20s and I didn't know a lot about taking care of myself. In those early years, I was really hustling. I was self-employed for the first time. I was doing it out of desperation. And so a lot of the spaces I was in, I was there really anxious. And I remember I had really chronic eczema, like my skin would break out, and it just got to the point where I couldn't shake hands with people anymore because my skin was so dry and it would crack. Very graphic, I know. But anyway, I remember when it physically was impossible to even just shake people's hands. I had to pull back and I really reflected on like what was happening. And I actually, as I pulled back, I started to cut out things that I didn't realize were causing so much anxiety and stress in my life. And I started to really approach life in a way that, like, I started to try to get to know myself. I started to like come back to myself. And other words, other point of references I have is, getting in touch with your inner child, getting in touch with the younger version of yourself. But the point is that because I worked on what would be considered intangible, being in touch with oneself. It was amazing how that manifested physically. My eczema had cleared. I don't have any major eczema breakouts anymore. I also just changed a lot of my lifestyle. I mainly eat whole foods. I work out. I do all these things. And to me, it's just amazing to experience like what it means to really be in tune with yourself. And so that's how I relate in hearing you talk about your client. Does that sound kind of similar in the way that energy work works?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what you're talking about is that stillness factor, right? Giving your moments of time to really connect and hear yourself. What does my body physically need right now? And what am I providing my body that's not supporting it? And whether that's your external environment or the food that you eat. Everything in energy medicine is about understanding that reference point and really connecting in at a deeper level so that essentially, as you are starting to understand yourself and what that means to be you as who you are without any judgment and really allowing the processing to be, that's what unlocks the nervous system. Right.
Mm.
So when I see people that come in, a lot of them are dealing with what I call the lower three energy centers. So the root, sacral, and solar. And those three govern our emotions, our sense of safety, our creativity, literally birthing energy. So either birthing an idea or birthing a human being, and our sense of autonomy, control, and power. And that all constructs to become our confidence and how we show up in the world. And so, if we're not dealing with the past or anything that's going on inside, as you know, things begin to shake and crumble at any given moment, right? Whether it's our mental health, our physical health, and you can truly only hold on so long. And so, as we're starting to understand, like, awareness is one of the biggest keys for transformation. What we choose to ignore, we cannot change, right? Like, it's just a part of it. And so, what you're describing and what I hear you saying is that I got really close with myself, which was the first opportunity I gave myself that space. And being able to see, okay, this isn't in alignment or this isn't productive, this isn't helping. You were able to make small habit changes that ended up creating a whole ripple in your entire life. And, part of energy work is the integration of the energy work. So it's not that you just come in and you magically feel amazing afterwards. You do feel amazing. Don't get me wrong. People always, refer back to, they sleep really well that night or they had this inspiration come in, but it's about the before and the after. So you have to do the work on the other side of things to continue to integrate that change. And it becomes easier every time you show up for the work, every time you connect in. And what I like to say is that you get more inquisitive. So when you're going through something in the beginning, when something triggers you or wakes you up and makes you think about something, it can be hard, it can be emotional. But as you work through the layers, you begin to get more inquisitive. You're starting to ask, where did this originate in my experience? And where am I feeling this in my body? Instead of before trying to run from it through whether you have different addiction patterns, so overworking, overspending, maybe even different substances. So we will avoid doing the inner work at all costs until we can't anymore. And so we try to get away from doing that in doing these practices.
I want to focus on the phrase you said, integrate the change. I think that the word integrate, I think shouldn't be underestimated because it's a process, right? And I know that what you do as a root cause practitioner, part of how you work with your clients is first starting with personal alignment, if I understand that correctly. So, can you tell us what that process looks like, getting them started working with you?
Yes. So when clients come to me, they're in this state of transition,
Mm,
usually,
mhm.
whether that's entrepreneurial transition, like they just got started on their business and they are just really stuck not knowing what to do, or they're just in a major life identity transition where they're questioning, what is next? Is this all? Do I have purpose? What is my legacy? And so, in working together, we're trying to find what's preventing them from feeling worthy of that change, from feeling aligned with the life that they live. And what it looks like as a root cause practitioner, personal alignment is the first thing. You can do every single marketing technique and tactic over here in your business, and it might grow, but it will not grow to the level and capacity that it could because your energy is a direct reflection into your business. And what you believe about your worthiness is a reflection of what you receive. And so, as we do the inner work, your business starts to align, or if you're not a business owner, your relationships start to align. And your career even aligns, opportunities open. And so, as a root cause practitioner, I'm listening to the language that you're using. So, how are you describing your everyday life? How are you describing your experience? A prime example is that, a lot of people come from the state of burnout in their career.
Mm.
So, I'm helping them identify that they're in burnout most of the time, or they already know they're in burnout and they're looking for their next opportunity. And so, understanding that if your energy is so fixated on, I have to be burnt out to be successful, we have to fix that, right? We have to understand where's the root cause of that and where did you learn that that is how you have to operate most of the time. It's through phrases like hard work pays off,
Mhm.
sleep, or I'll sleep when I'm dead. All these phrases that we think are funny, but they really ingrain in our psyche that that is truth. So instead of ease equaling efficiency, ease equals laziness. You know, so we have to learn how to reframe our mindset that things do get to be easier. It's not that you don't still effort and put in work. That's a misconception that it can't be easy, right? It can be. It doesn't mean that you're not still working, right?
Mhm.
But we have to go in and understand where those patterns are starting. Did it start when you were at age 4? Did another incident happen at age 7? How about your adolescence? What were your relationships like? And how supported were you in the developmental process of being who you are?
Mhm.
Because our parents did as best as they could. This isn't to guilt or shame any parents because everybody has their own capacity. Like you were mentioning earlier, every single generation was stuck in survival up until this point, and we are in a survival mode right now for different reasons, but we are unlearning that pattern and trying
Mhm.
to shift out of that energy. And again, our parents only do the best they can. And so we have to honor where they're at and their capacity. I'm not saying condoning behavior by any means, like when you go through different traumas. However, when we're going back to understand how we can move through and beyond, we have to be able to sit with the fact that we came into this world with the parents that we have. We can't change that environment, that what we went through. We can change how connected and how we interpret that environment.
Mhm.
And so in energy work and inner child work, we're constantly going back in the timeline and guiding you through supporting yourself again and bringing that connection point back to where you feel whole, you feel safe, you feel supported in this lifetime now, where you might not have had that before. And this can look different across people. I will share just my personal experience is that, growing up in a household where both of my parents worked at night. So I was constantly with babysitters, my grandma, my aunt, and then other babysitters. And so I had developed a sense of disconnection from my family. And I mean, growing up, that's all I knew was separation. And so as an adult, it was really easy for me to isolate and not want to be in relationship with other people because my lived and learned experience was that the people I love separate from me.
Mhm.
And so I had to come to that realization and understand. And there were other things going on in my home, but the other thing is that I had to even learn that one thing to help me become a better spouse because it was really easy for me to go off and do my own thing and not be super connected. And I'm like, oh, we don't need to be around each other, all the time. That kind of, not that you need that, but it's easy for me to isolate if I wasn't careful, right? And so again, we have to learn where we started this pattern or this way of being. And on the energy side of things, I get to go in and help shift the energetic signature. So we vibrate at a frequency based on our experiences, based on our emotions, based on our mood. And we will continue to replicate that energy in every single area of our life, whether that's our work, our relationships, our friendships, any kind of relation. And so, as we're starting to look at these different areas of our life, we can start to question what is that feeling? Is it chaos? Is it support? And, really understanding what it is and then understanding what the shift you want to create. So I know that that's going a really deep into things, but essentially, I'm here to help people see and connect the dots for their patterns.
Mhm.
And then from there, they have the power of choice to get to integrate and do life differently. Like I said, on the energy side of things, as a practitioner, I go in and I help clear the energetic patterns. So once you've decided I'm no longer accepting this into my life, like this is not the truth I want to have, we go in through a guided meditation and the energy work and energy support and help clear that energy pattern out of your body so that you're no longer holding on to that experience in the same way. And again, I've seen clients heal their physical body their emotions are much easier to process, and their life quite literally changes.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I was thinking about the question that's in my head is you mentioned that most of your clients come to you in a bit of chaos and they're looking for a solution. How do you speak to them about even slowing down and self-reflecting? We can get into your 6-week sessions here because I'm sure being handheld helps a lot. But and also the choice to want to make the time. But tell us about that delicate process, that transition of okay, I'm going to choose differently now. Help me. You know what I mean? Help me. How do I even begin? All right. And we are going to wrap it up right there for now. Part 2 of Candice's interview will be released next Thursday. Candice will start off by answering my question. So, how do you even begin with energy work? Please check out the show notes of this episode to see how you can get a hold of Candice. All of her links will be provided in the show notes. Just visit insidethefort.com, episode 231. And again, we will wrap up our interview next Thursday with episode 232. So thanks again and chat soon. Hey, thanks for listening. If you're seeking a second opinion on the Survivor Benefit Plan, subscribe to our podcast now at insidethefort.com. That's insidethefort.com. Once you subscribe, you will receive a free download to the introduction of my book, The Military Spouse Benefit Plan. Why? Because you've spent years holding it down for your family, and we are dedicated to helping you own what's next. See you on the inside at insidethefort.com, or we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.